My name is Scott Challoner, and you are listening to the Leaders Council podcast for the people who run the country and the people who keep the country running. As regular listeners of our programme will know very well, part of our mission here at the Leaders Council is to bring you a variety of distinct perspectives on leadership and current affairs. And to this end, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Luke Arnold, founder and director at Hope for You, onto today's programme. Hope for You is an organisation whose purpose is to eradicate poverty and improve financial well-being through providing a range of services to tackle the immediate problems that individuals are facing with money and help address any underlying issues that may be there. And in the context of the current cost of living crisis that we're going through, such work could not be more important. Luke, very warm welcome to you, and thanks for joining us on the show.
Yeah, hi Scott. Thank you for having me today.
It's my pleasure, Luke, and it's very important, isn't it, the work that you're doing at the moment, as I've said, in the context of the current climate that we're dealing with. But before we sort of get into the specifics of what Hope for You is doing on the front line, as it were, I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of the inspiration behind building the organisation, because I understand your earlier career involved a stint in the military, didn't it? So what was kind of behind the transition from that life to what it is that you're doing now?
Yeah, so I've probably had a different journey to some people, I guess. I think straight from school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So it was just going to the military for me. Unfortunately, whilst I was in there, I got injured, so I came out. But from that, like many other people, I jumped from job to job, didn't know what I wanted to do still. Then I fell into a job. It was in this type of industry, but I didn't agree with probably the governance or the way it was run, or for what purpose they were doing it for. So I decided to move away from that and set up Hope for You. So myself and Carol, another director, really, once we got going with Hope for You, we set it up for the right reasons. And obviously that reason was to make a difference. It's not about obviously the end line, the profit or anything. If we can't make a difference to people's lives or really make an impact, I don't think we're in it for the right reasons.
Exactly right. And just thinking about sort of the qualities and the work that it took to actually set about building this organisation, would you say that the experience that you had in your earlier career in the armed forces, do you think that actually helped you in any way when it came to sort of the practicalities and the leadership qualities necessary to actually start out on your own like this?
I think it does intertwine a little bit. I guess from that bit of discipline and probably never giving up. Because I think from the start of any organisation, it's always going to be hard. There is always going to be moments that you doubt, is it going to work? Or is it going to be what we envisioned it to be? But it's always seeing that end goal it's always that silver lining, and you're doing it for a better reason. So I guess, obviously, some qualities do stick with you. You just keep going, really. Keep going until you reach the goal.
Yeah, exactly right. And you talk about sort of the purpose of the organisation being to really make a difference to people's lives, and the overarching mission behind that is essentially to eradicate poverty and help improve people's financial well-being. And as we touched on already during this discussion, that work couldn't be more important right now. So what are some of the practical steps that you're taking to sort of try and achieve that mission at the moment? What's the sort of support that's on offer there?
Yeah, so I think, as you said, our mission is to eradicate poverty, and I think it's a very, very bold statement, which unfortunately I don't think will ever be achieved in our lifetimes. But we can make a dent in it, and that is our mission. So I think the biggest part of eradicating poverty is obviously promoting sustainability. Without sustainability, there can be no progress. So we support people in all different ways, in partnership with other organisations and companies. We like to support them financially, so whether that's their benefits, income maximisation, their budgeting. Obviously, a big aspect of everything is always behavioural change, which quite often is the most difficult step in moving forward, because some people don't want to change. We can give them all the tools, the knowledge they want, but we can't force them to change, unfortunately. That is a step individuals have to take themselves, which, like I say, is probably the most difficult step.
Yes, I can see where you're coming from there, because there's a couple of old adages there, isn't there? That obviously if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but if you teach him how to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. So it's giving them the knowledge, but then there's also on the sort of the other side of the coin, if you will, another adage, which is you can lead a horse to water, but you can't necessarily make it drink as well. So it's about people kind of understanding the need for behavioural change and, you know, sort of sensible budgeting, but then they've got to kind of take on the mantle of that responsibility for themselves. And that sort of ties in with something that you mentioned a little bit earlier on, actually, that I want to hone in on as well. It's the fact that you want to make a dent in poverty, and that's perfectly understandable. And but you feel sort of on the whole that it's never going to be completely eradicated in our lifetime. So what are the challenges, what are the barriers that are in the way of actually achieving that aim? Would you say that the challenge of trying to implement sort of those behavioural changes is one of those barriers?
It probably is, to be honest. I think every organisation can do as much as they want to do, but we can never force an individual to be or do something they don't want to do. Obviously, because that's just not human, really, is it? We can give them tools, we can give them money, or we can give them free food or anything, but it doesn't mean they'll want it. So I think that probably is the most difficult part of everything. And I think another difficult part is organisations quite often they don't work together. I think everyone sees everyone as a competitor, which in this industry I think is quite a wrong word, to be honest. I don't think anyone in this industry should be competitors. We should all work collaboratively to actually achieve the best impact for the end individuals, which is why we all apparently set up. But it just isn't the case.
It's a very interesting point that you made there, because I suppose one of the massive challenges lying in the way of eradicating poverty is the scale of the problem, because we're seeing it in immense amounts across the UK at the moment, aren't we? But it's a worldwide issue, isn't it, poverty? We see it in so many countries. And therefore, what you've just mentioned there about sort of competing charitable organisations, I think competing, as you say, I do agree in the sense that might be the wrong word, because I don't think any one organisation is going to be able to take on the full mantle, is it? And indeed,
no.
A lot of businesses, organisations rather, in the field are finding, that they're getting far, far more referrals, certainly in this country in the here and now with the cost of living crisis. And a lot of charitable concerns are needed in order to address all of the very many issues that are out there, aren't they? And you're actually plugging some of the gaps that other organisations are unable to take on.
Yeah. So like you say, to achieve the best impact, we all have to work together. And obviously, no one is an expert in everything. For instance, we're not experts in some fields, but our partnerships that we have with other organisations, they are experts in. For instance, we don't do debt advice, so we have a partnership with a third-party organisation that sorts everyone's debt advice for us. It's all using our strengths to our advantages. We all have our different strengths, much like any human being. It's just sharing that knowledge and sharing best practice and ways we can work together to work as a whole to really impact the whole nation. Quite like you say, it is all over the world. I think everyone, unfortunately, wants to define poverty, whether they want to call it food poverty or fuel poverty or housing poverty. Unfortunately, poverty is poverty. If they are in food poverty, they're most likely in financial poverty, or if they're in financial poverty, they're probably in food poverty. To categorize any subject like that, I think is quite difficult to do.
It is, isn't it? And I suppose one of the big issues as well is that people are sort of suffering from various forms of poverty, often multiple forms, as you've just mentioned there, and they may not necessarily be sort of fully aware of the support that is out there for them, or maybe they feel that there's perhaps a stigma attached to actually reaching out and looking for that support, because there are a lot of people out there at the moment that are probably using food banks but probably won't come out and sort of admit that publicly, and that's something also that I think we really need to challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, I think obviously stigmas in this day and age is a huge thing. Unfortunately, there is still judgment, or there is still embarrassment of asking for help, when you're probably embarrassed for the person next door to you when they're probably in the same situation. If you actually reach out for help, you'll probably be amazed how many people will not judge you, or you won't feel embarrassed, or will comfort you in that. I think there's a stigma in very different fields. Massively relates to probably mental health as well, and obviously big statements about men's mental health lately as well have been going out, reaching out for support. It's not wrong to do so, or you shouldn't be embarrassed to ever reach out for support. There are so many organisations out there that will support you and can support you to actually make a real difference in whatever issue you are facing.
Yeah, and the mental health element of all of this is so very important as well. And I suppose that you feel particularly impassioned by that, given sort of your sort of previous career in the armed forces, and we're seeing a lot of sort of issues around that, and sort of subsequent poverty from people who are actually leaving the army and maybe are sort of struggling to adapt to civilian life as well. So that is a demographic for which sort of mental health is incredibly important. And sometimes I know we've gotten a lot better at talking about the subject since the pandemic in particular, but I think we need to maintain some positive momentum on that, don't we? Because the effects of that on sort of our situations, and also the effects of poverty on our mental health, I mean, it's like there needs to be some real awareness raised.
No, I agree. I think the biggest part of that, like you say, is the momentum. I think everyone, as soon as a big incident happens, there are things organisations or individuals do or say, but they don't keep it up. In most cases, that, for instance, there is UFC fighters or footballers or celebrities that are all talking about men's mental health, but probably the case is how long will it last? Much like all the funding or the support going across the UK at the moment, obviously that's all in after COVID or the cost of living crisis. But once we've done it just to affect immediate crises, will we keep it up? Which I think is the most important part. It's all consistency and momentum that really makes the difference in the long term.
It absolutely does. And one of the ways that charitable organisations can seek to do that, as we've talked about, is through collaboration. And that doesn't necessarily mean essentially, you know, sort of trading sort of intellectual property, if you will, if you want to call it sort of as extensive as that. It can even sort of be as simple as signposting, can't it? Because you mentioned already that you are a charity with partnerships, and if you are not a specialist in a particular area that someone might need help with, such as debt advice, for instance, you can lead them to a partner that will be able to help them with the specifics of that problem, while, of course, you have your own raft of support that you can offer to them if, of course, they need to call upon that. Yeah.
No, I agree. I think everyone should do signposting. I have come across organisations in the past, over the time of setting up Hope for You, that some organisations just want to hold their customers. I don't know whether it's an empowerment thing or it is they're trying to compete for some reason, which, like I've said a few times, the end goal is the individuals. We have to work together to achieve that best goal, and the only way for that to do is using our strengths. We can do so much with an individual, but we can only go so far. We're not registered to do debt advice, so obviously we will not deliver it. So we use our specialist partner to do that. We don't have a food bank, but we know food banks around us that we can make food vouchers for. There are so many things you can do if you actually work together. and it really creates that wraparound service for that end individual to achieve the best possible outcome.
It does, doesn't it? And it essentially means that you're providing a service that is all-encompassing without being able to provide all of that directly at source, aren't you? And that becomes very, very powerful, doesn't it? And it's a real indicator of just what can be achieved when organisations in the third sector do come together in this way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the power really is in if we unite. If I'm honest, there's not a lot of power if one organisation wants to lead the nation on any type of service. It's not going to work. If you had 10 organisations working together to impact the whole country, I'm sure you'll see a huge difference rather than one organisation doing it alone. There is a lot of power in partnerships or networking or collaboration, which people just are very traditional that they don't want to do it, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's a real shame that we do see that happening in the industry, isn't it? And I do hope that it is something that, you know, people really take on board, and those actually tuning into this podcast do really absorb that message and do think that there's a lot that can be achieved when different charities come together to address sort of the underlying problems. And as you said there, I think what should always be the case is that the end goal is end outcomes for the individual, isn't it? That's ultimately what's the most important. And I suppose as you prioritise that over the course of the next few months in this new year, 2023, as we try to get a grip on the cost of living pressures that we're facing, I'd be interested to understand, Luke, just before we finish up today, as to sort of what some of your ambitions are within Hope for You this year and what it is that you're really sort of hoping to achieve. Are there any major milestones that you've got eyed up and sort of really trying to address the challenges that we're facing right now?
It's probably a difficult one, to be honest. We are unfortunately taking every day as it comes. We would like to expand in more different parts of the country. We are making quite a big dent in the West Midlands, now in Cornwall, and across everywhere really. But we would like to open more pockets that we are specialised in all over the country, and working more in collaboration with larger organisations such as energy companies, water companies, gas companies. They all have customers who need support. And if that support is not in place, it's something that needs to be addressed. A lot of conversations I've been having is that organisations are looking to add that extra layer of support that they've previously been doing, which is where we come into play for a lot of it, embedding that sustainability and really achieving a financial uplift for the end individual.
Would you say that some of those companies that you talked about there, so, you know, the utilities firms that you've mentioned, so the energy companies, the water companies, those that people may be struggling to pay their bills to right now, do you think that they have a duty of care to their customers, and therefore it's imperative that they're actually reaching out and talking with and engaging in dialogue with organisations such as yourselves to see how they can sort of best help people and sort of best sort of alter their circumstances?
I do. I do think a lot of utilities have a duty of care for the individuals, and a lot of utilities are doing great work to support their customers. But sometimes I think using a specialist organisation to really import and design a project that will make an everlasting difference, like ourselves, is probably a right way to go. It's always good to use an outside perspective on what works, what doesn't work. In our organisation, we've got over 30 years experience in the vulnerability sector. So we know what works, we know what doesn't work. We know how to best engage with the customers. We know the best interaction routes. So I do agree. I think they do have they should have a duty of care for the customers and should be actively seeking out to organisations like ourselves to support them in that.
Absolutely right, because essentially you are the experts in providing that sort of tailored support to support individuals and families. So it is important that those large organisations are engaging with charities such as yourselves. And for anybody that is listening into this particular podcast who, you know, may feel impassioned by some of the issues that we have discussed today, do go and check out Luke's organisation, Hope for You, if you are in need of support or feel that you can help them on their mission. And the best port of call for that would be, I think, Hope for You with a digit4.co.uk. Is that right, Luke?
That is right, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Please do go and check that out as well. And just a reminder as well to those listening into the programme today, if you wish to bring your own perspective on this issue or any other topical matter to the discussion table, then you too can apply to be on our programme via leaderscouncil.co.uk/apply. Or if you have a question for myself or Luke on any of the the topics that we've covered today, then you are able to submit questions to us, and that would be via leaderscouncil.co.uk/contact-us. And you can even leave comments on some of the issues that we've talked about, or even your own perspective on some of those topics if you do not want to come on to the show directly. For now, Luke, it has been my immense pleasure to welcome you onto the programme, and thanks ever so much for the time taken to join us on the show. And I do certainly wish you all the luck in the world in executing your mission to the best possible effect over the course of the next 12 months. And hopefully more individuals come and reach out for that support. Don't feel stigmatized about having to do that, and hopefully we see more of that sort of cross-sector collaboration that we've talked about as well, because I feel that in the future, in addressing these issues, it's going to be immensely important.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on, Scott. It has been good to talk on the current crisis and what is out there, and obviously our visions to go forward.
Exactly right. And again, to those listening in, if you are feeling the pinch at the moment, please don't hesitate to go out there and look for the support that is available. It is out there, and try to break away from the stigma, because reaching out for that support and feeling the benefit of that, it far outweighs any of those sort of issues around the stigma that you may feel. And just to remind all of you again, I've been your host on today's episode of the Leaders Council podcast, Scott Challoner. And until next time, when we will be back with a whole new perspective on current affairs, please do take care all, and goodbye.